I grew up in northern Arizona, about 40 minutes outside of Flagstaff. Our property sat at the edge of the Navajo reservation, surrounded by high desert and juniper trees. My family isn't native, but we'd lived there for generations, and we knew enough to respect the land and the stories that came with it. My grandfather used to tell me about skinwalkers when I was young. He'd sit on the porch at sunset and talk about them in this quiet, serious voice. He said they were people who'd gone bad, who'd done terrible things to gain dark power. He told me never to whistle at night, never to talk about them after dark, and never, ever to look one in the eyes if I saw something that didn't seem right. I always thought they were just stories, something to keep kids from wandering too far from the house. But what happened during the summer I turned 19 changed everything. It was late July, and the heat was brutal. I'd been working on a ranch about 20 miles from our place, helping with fence repairs and livestock. The work was hard, but the pay was decent, and I needed the money for college. Most days I'd get home around 7, eat dinner, and crash. One Thursday night I got home later than usual. The truck had overheated on the way back, and I'd had to pull over and wait for the engine to cool down. By the time I pulled into our driveway, it was almost 9:30. The sun had set, and the sky was that deep purple color it gets right before full dark. I parked near the house and grabbed my work bag from the passenger seat. That's when I heard it. My own voice, calling from somewhere past the tree line. It said my name, clear as day, like I was calling out to myself. I froze. The voice came again, a little closer this time. It sounded exactly like me, same tone, same inflection, but I wasn't saying anything. I was just standing there, keys in my hand, staring at the trees. My grandfather's warnings came rushing back. Don't answer. Don't go toward it. I hurried to the front, the door. But before I could get inside, I heard footsteps. Not running, just walking. Steady, coming from the direction of the voice. I looked back and saw something moving between the trees. It was too dark to make out details, but the shape was wrong. It moved like a person, but the proportions were off. The arms were too long, and the way it walked was stiff, mechanical, like it was imitating movement rather than doing it naturally. I got inside and locked the door. My mom was in the kitchen, and I tried to tell her what I'd heard. She went pale. She told me to stay inside, to not look out the windows. Then, she called my grandfather, who lived about 10 minutes away. He showed up within 15 minutes, carrying a rifle. He didn't go outside right away. Instead, he walked through the house, checking every window, every door. He told us to turn off most of the lights and to stay away from the windows. Then he sat in the living room with the rifle across his lap and waited. Around 11, we heard it again. My voice, coming from right outside the living room window. It was calling my mum's name this time, asking her to come outside, saying I'd locked myself out, that I needed help. My mum started to stand up, but my grandfather grabbed her arm and shook his head. He whispered that it wasn't me, that I was right there in the room with them. She nodded, tears in her eyes, and sat back down. The voice kept calling. It moved around the house, trying different windows, different doors. Sometimes it sounded like me, sometimes like my mum. Once, it even sounded like my grandfather, calling to my mum from the front porch. This went on for hours. Every time the voice would stop, we'd start to relax, and then it would start again. My grandfather never moved from his spot. He just sat there, watching the windows, the rifle ready. What I didn't tell anyone until years later was what I saw through the gap in the curtains. Around midnight, when my grandfather had gotten up to check the back door, I couldn't help myself. I moved to the window and looked out, just for a second. It was standing in our front yard, about 20 feet from the house. The shape was clearer now under the dim glow of our porch light. It looked almost human, but everything was stretched wrong. The limbs were too thin and too long. The head sat at a slight angle, like the neck couldn't quite support it properly, and it was completely naked, its skin a strange grayish color that didn't look natural. But the worst part was its face. It was trying to arrange its features into something human, something that looked like me, but it couldn't quite get it right. The eyes were too far apart, the mouth was too wide. It looked like a child's drawing of a person, three-dimensional and moving. When it noticed me looking, It smiled. That smile was the most terrifying thing I've ever seen. Too many teeth, all of them too sharp. Then it tilted its head and spoke in my voice, asking me to please come outside, asking me why I was being so rude to a guest. I jerked back from the window, my heart hammering. My grandfather saw my face when he came back into the room. He asked me what I'd seen. I couldn't speak, just shook my head. He understood. He told me that some things are better left unseen, that now I'd have to carry that image with me. Around 3 in the morning, everything went quiet. The voice stopped. The footsteps stopped. My grandfather waited another hour before he finally stood up and checked outside. He walked the perimeter of the house with a flashlight, but he didn't find anything. No tracks, no signs that anyone had been there. He told us to stay inside until sunrise, said that whatever it was, it would be gone by then. We sat up the rest of the night, drinking coffee, not talking much. When the sun finally came up, my grandfather went outside again and walked the property. He found tracks near the tree line. They started out looking human, normal boot prints in the dust. But as they got closer to the house, they changed. The prints became longer, narrower, almost like animal tracks, but not quite. They circled the house multiple times before heading back into the desert. Near the living room window, where I'd seen it standing, my grandfather found something else. Tufts of coarse hair, grayish-brown, scattered on the ground. He collected some in a plastic bag but never told me what he did with it. He also found deep scratches in the dirt, like something had been digging or clawing at the ground while it waited. My grandfather told me to pack a bag. He said I was going to stay with him for a while, that it wasn't safe for me to be at the house. I didn't argue. I grabbed my things and left with him. I stayed at his place for 2 weeks. During that time, my mom said she'd hear things at night, scratching at the windows, footsteps on the roof. Once, she heard my voice calling from the backyard, asking to be let in. She never opened the door. My grandfather performed some kind of ceremony around his property. He never told me exactly what it was, but I saw him burning sage and cedar, walking the perimeter of his land while speaking in a language I didn't understand. He said it was for protection, to make sure the thing wouldn't follow me there. After 2 weeks, the sound stopped. My grandfather said it had probably moved on, found somewhere else to go. He told me I could go home, but he also told me to be careful, to never answer if I heard my voice calling from outside, to never go towards something that didn't feel right. I moved back home, but I was never comfortable there again. I started college that fall and moved into a dorm in Flagstaff. I'd come home to visit, but I never stayed overnight, and I never, ever went outside after dark when I was there. My mom sold the property 3 years later. She said she couldn't take it anymore, that she didn't feel safe. The new owners were from California, didn't know anything about the area's history, stories. My mom never told them what had happened. She said it wouldn't be fair to burden them with it, that maybe it would leave them alone. But 6 months after they moved in, they put the property back on the market. They didn't give a reason, just packed up and left. The house sat empty for over a year before someone finally bought it again. As far as I know, no one's lived there for more than a few months at a time since then. We never talked about what happened that night. Not really. But I know she heard it too. I know she knows. I'm 32 now, living in Phoenix. I don't go back to that area anymore, and I still follow my grandfather's rules. I don't whistle at night. I don't talk about skinwalkers after dark. And if I ever hear my own voice calling from somewhere I'm not, I won't answer. My grandfather passed away last year. At his funeral, one of his Navajo friends pulled me aside. He said my grandfather had told him about what happened that night. He said my grandfather had done everything right, that he'd protected us the best way he knew how. Then he gave me a small leather pouch filled with herbs and told me to keep it with me always. I wear it around my neck now. I don't know if it does anything, if it offers any real protection, but it makes me feel closer to my grandfather. And on nights when I hear strange sounds outside my apartment, when I feel that old familiar dread creeping in, I hold on to it and remember his words. Some things in this world don't want to be understood. They just want to be feared. And sometimes, the smartest thing you can do is give them that fear, respect it, and stay as far away as you can. I drive a lot for work. I'm a field technician for a telecommunications company, and my territory covers most of northwestern New Mexico. That means long stretches of empty highway, small towns separated by miles of nothing, and a lot of time alone with my thoughts. Route 491 runs north to south through some of the most isolated country you can imagine. It cuts right through the Navajo Nation, and during winter, it can get pretty desolate. Most people avoid it at night if they can, but sometimes I don't have a choice. This happened in January, about 2 years ago. I'd been working on a cell tower near Shiprock, and the job had taken longer than expected. By the time I finished, it was almost 8 at night. I had a 2-hour drive back to Farmington, and I was exhausted. The temperature had dropped to around 15 degrees, and there was ice on the road. I was taking it slow, maybe 45 miles an hour, watching for black ice. There was no moon that night, and the darkness felt heavy, absolute. My headlights only cut about 50 feet into it. I'd been driving for maybe 20 minutes when I saw him. A man standing on the shoulder of the road, thumb out, hitchhiking. He was wearing a denim jacket and jeans. No hat, no gloves. In that cold, he should have been hypothermic. I slowed down as I passed him, not sure if I should stop. I'm not supposed to pick up hitchhikers' company policy, but leaving someone out there in that weather felt wrong. I checked my rearview mirror and saw him still standing there, not moving, just watching my taillights. I kept driving, but something about the image bothered me. His posture had been too still, too rigid, and in the split second my headlights had hit him, I'd noticed his eyes. They'd reflected the light, bright and yellow, like an animal's. I tried to shake it off, told myself it was just the angle, the way the light hit, but I couldn't stop thinking about it. About 5 miles later, I saw him again. Same man, same jacket, same position, standing on the shoulder with his thumb out, like he'd been waiting for me. But there was no way he could have gotten ahead of me. I'd been driving for 5 miles at 45 miles an hour, and there were no turnoffs, no side roads he could have taken. My heart started pounding. I sped up, pushing the truck to 60 despite the ice. I watched the man shrink in my rearview mirror, and then he was gone, swallowed by the darkness. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe I'd been mistaken. Maybe it was a different person. But deep down, I knew that wasn't true. It was the same man, the same jacket, the same unnatural stillness. 10 miles later, I saw him again. This time he was closer to the road, almost in my lane. I had to swerve to avoid him, my tires skidding slightly on a patch of ice. My headlights swept across his face, and I got a good look. His expression was blank, emotionless. His skin was too pale, almost gray. And his eyes, those yellow eyes, were fixed directly on me. I didn't slow down. I pressed the gas pedal to the floor, pushing the truck as fast as I dared on that icy road. I watched the speedometer climb to 70, then 75. The truck was shaking, the tires struggling for traction. I didn't see him again for a while, but I couldn't relax. Every shadow, every rock formation on the side of the road, I thought it was him. I kept checking my mirrors, expecting to see him standing there. My radio had been playing classic rock, but somewhere around this point it started acting up. The signal would fade in and out, and between stations I'd hear strange sounds. Static, yes, but also something that sounded almost like breathing. Deep, raspy breaths that didn't match any pattern I recognized. I switched the radio off. The silence was worse. All I could hear was the engine, the tires on the asphalt, and my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. I cranked up the heat, but I still felt cold. That bone-deep cold that has nothing to do with temperature. Then, about 15 miles from Farmington, my headlights caught something in the middle of the road. Not on the shoulder this time, right in the center of my lane. It was him, but he wasn't standing anymore. He was crouched down on all fours, his head twisted at an unnatural angle to look at me. His mouth was open, too wide, showing too many teeth. I slammed on the brakes. The truck went into a skid, sliding sideways on the ice. I fought to control it, my hands gripping the wheel, my foot pumping the brake. The truck spun a full 180 before finally stopping. When I looked up, he was gone. The road ahead was empty. I sat there for a moment, breathing hard, my hands shaking. Then I noticed movement in my side mirror. He was standing right next to my door, his face pressed against the window, his yellow eyes staring at me. I didn't think. I just reacted. I threw the truck into drive and floored it. The tires spun on the ice, then caught, and the truck lurched forward. I heard something hit the side of the vehicle, a solid thump that made the whole truck shake, but I didn't stop. I kept driving. In my rearview mirror, I saw him standing in the middle of the road, watching me go. But he wasn't alone anymore. There were others with him now. 3 or 4 figures, all standing in a line across the highway, all watching me with those same yellow eyes. Then my truck went around a curve, and they disappeared from view. I made it to Farmington in record time. I drove straight to the company yard, parked under the brightest lights I could find, and sat there until my hands stopped shaking. Then I called my supervisor and told him I needed to file an incident report. He asked what happened. I told him I'd hit something on the road, maybe a deer, and that I needed to document it for insurance purposes. I didn't tell him the truth. I couldn't. He wouldn't have believed me. The next morning, I checked the truck for damage. There was a dent on the passenger side, right below the window, and there were scratches, long, deep gouges in the metal that looked like claw marks. But there was no blood, no hair, nothing that would indicate I'd hit an animal. The scratches were strange. They were too uniform, too deliberate. 5 parallel lines, evenly spaced, running from the door handle down to the wheel well. I took photos of them before I filed the report. I still have those photos on my phone. Sometimes I look at them and try to convince myself there's some rational explanation. I asked around, talked to other drivers who worked that route. A few of them had stories. One guy said he'd seen a hitchhiker who appeared multiple times on the same stretch of road. Another said he'd hit something that looked human but ran off on all 4s. They all said the same thing: don't stop, don't pick anyone up. And if you see something that doesn't look right, just keep driving. One of the older drivers, a guy named Tom who'd been with the company for 20 years, pulled me aside after I'd asked around. He told me he'd had an experience on Route 491 back in the 90s. He said he'd stopped for someone, against his better judgment, and the person had gotten in his truck. Tom said the guy seemed normal at first, quiet, but polite, said he was heading to Farmington. But after about 5 minutes, Tom noticed the guy wasn't breathing. His chest wasn't moving, and when Tom looked over at him, the guy turned and smiled, and Tom saw that his teeth were all wrong. Too sharp, too many of them. Tom said he pulled over and told the guy to get out. The guy just kept smiling, said he wasn't ready to leave yet. Then Tom pulled his pistol from the glove box and pointed it at him. The guy's smile disappeared. He opened the door and stepped out, and Tom drove away as fast as he could. When Tom looked in his rearview mirror, the guy was standing in the middle of the road, growing taller, his body stretching and changing. Tom said he never went back on that route after dark again. He said he'd take the long way, add an extra hour to his drive, rather than risk seeing that thing again. After hearing Tom's story, I started doing the same thing. I still work that route sometimes, but I don't drive it at night anymore. I schedule my job so I'm back in town before sunset, and if I absolutely have to be out there after dark, I don't stop for anything. Not for hitchhikers, not for animals, not for anything, because I know what I saw, and I know it's still out there, waiting on the side of Route 491, looking for the next person who'll stop. Last month, I heard that a driver from another company went missing on that route. They found his truck abandoned near mile marker 47, right in the area where I'd seen the hitchhiker. The driver's door was open, the engine still running. His phone and wallet were still inside, but he was gone. They searched for 3 days, but never found any trace of him. The police said he probably wandered off the road, maybe got disoriented or hypothermic. But I know better. I know what happened to him. And every time I drive past that spot now, I say a quiet prayer for him and keep my eyes straight ahead. My brother and I used to go camping every October in the Chuska Mountains. It was a tradition we'd started when we were teenagers, and we'd kept it going even after we both got jobs and families. Every year, same weekend, same general area. We'd pack our gear, drive up into the mountains, and spend 3 days hiking, fishing, and getting away from everything. The area we usually camped in was remote. You had to take a logging road for about 8 miles, then hike another 2 miles to reach the spot. It was beautiful up there, pine forests, clear streams, and at night, you could see more stars than you'd ever imagine. We'd been going there for almost 15 years without any problems. But what happened 3 years ago made sure we'll never go back. We arrived on a Friday afternoon in mid-October. The weather was perfect, cool but not cold. Clear skies, no wind. We set up camp in our usual spot, a small clearing near a stream, surrounded by tall pines. We had 2 tents, a fire pit, and enough supplies for 3 days. That first night was normal. We cooked dinner, sat around the fire, talked about work and family. Around 10, we put out the fire and went to bed. I fell asleep pretty quickly. I woke up around 2 in the morning to the sound of something moving outside my tent. At first, I thought it was my brother, maybe getting up to use the bathroom, but then I realized the sound was wrong. The footsteps were too heavy, too deliberate, and they were circling the tent. I lay there, listening, my heart starting to race. The footsteps stopped right outside the tent door. I could hear breathing, slow and steady. Then I heard my brother's voice. It was coming from outside my tent, asking if I was awake. But something about it sounded off. The words were right, but the tone was flat, emotionless. Like someone reading from a script. I didn't answer. I stayed completely still, barely breathing. After a moment, the footsteps moved away, heading toward my brother's tent. I heard the same voice again, this time calling my name, asking if I wanted to come outside. Then I heard my brother's actual voice, from inside his tent, asking what the hell was going on. He sounded scared, confused, and I realized that whatever was outside wasn't him. The thing outside went quiet. The footsteps stopped. For maybe 30 seconds, there was complete silence. Then we heard it move into the trees, branches snapping as it went. But it didn't go far. I could still hear it out there, just beyond the edge of the clearing. My brother and I stayed in our tents, not moving, not talking. I wanted to call out to him, to make sure he was okay, but I was afraid of drawing attention back to us. So, I just lay there, listening. Around 3, we heard it again, but this time it wasn't using our voices. It was making sounds I can't really describe. Low grunts, clicks, almost like it was testing different noises, seeing what worked. Then it started imitating other things. A dog barking, a woman crying, a child laughing. Each sound was wrong, too perfect, too precise. Like a recording played through a broken speaker, the woman's crying was particularly disturbing. It sounded like someone in genuine distress, sobbing and calling for help. Every instinct in my body told me to go help, to see what was wrong. But I knew it wasn't real. I knew it was trying to lure us out. Then, it started imitating my wife's voice. It called my name the way she does, with that particular inflection she uses when she's worried. It said I needed to come home, that something had happened to our kids. My blood ran cold. It knew details it shouldn't have known. It knew her voice perfectly. I had to bite down on my sleeping bag to keep from responding. Tears were streaming down my face, my body shaking with the effort of staying quiet. I knew it wasn't real, but hearing my wife's voice out there in the darkness, begging me to come help, was almost more than I could handle. This went on until just before dawn. When the sky started to lighten, the sounds stopped. We waited another hour before we finally came out of our tents. My brother looked terrible. He hadn't slept at all. Neither had I. We didn't talk about what had happened right away. We just started packing up our gear, moving quickly, wanting to get out of there. That's when we noticed the tracks. They were all around our camp, circling both tents, going down to the stream and back. They started out looking like bare footprints, human-sized but with the toes spread wider apart. But in some places, they changed. They became more like handprints, with long fingers pressed into the dirt. And in other places, they looked like animal tracks, four-legged, with claws. We followed them to the edge of the clearing, where they disappeared into the forest. But before they did, we found something else. Scratched into the bark of a large pine tree, about 7 feet off the ground, were marks, deep gouges, parallel lines, like something with claws had dragged them down the trunk. My brother took out his phone, and started taking pictures of everything. The tracks, the scratch marks, the layout of our camp. He said we needed documentation, that people wouldn't believe us otherwise. I helped him, though my hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold my phone steady. We also found something near the stream, a pile of small bones, arranged in a circle. They looked like rabbit bones, maybe squirrel, but they'd been placed deliberately, positioned with care. In the center of the circle was a tuft of hair, human hair, brown, like mine. We didn't stick around to investigate further. We grabbed our gear and hiked back to the truck as fast as we could. We didn't talk much on the way down. We were both too shaken, too focused on just getting out. When we reached the truck, we threw everything in the back and got on the road. It wasn't until we were 20 miles away that my brother finally said something. He asked if I'd heard it using his voice. I said yes. He said the same thing had happened to him. He'd heard it using my voice, calling from outside his tent. Then he told me something he hadn't mentioned before. He said that around 4 in the morning, right before dawn, he'd heard it trying to unzip his tent. The zipper had moved about halfway down before it stopped. He'd been lying there, holding his knife, ready to fight if it came inside, but it never did. It just stopped and moved away. I felt sick. I'd had no idea he'd been that close to danger. If that thing had gotten inside his tent, I don't know what would have happened. I don't know if I could have helped him in time. We drove back to Farmington in silence. When we got there, we went to a diner and had coffee, just sitting there, trying to process what had happened. My brother said he wanted to report it, maybe call the Forest Service or the tribal police. I told him they wouldn't believe us. He knew I was right. We decided to just let it go. We told our families the camping trip had been cut short due to weather. We didn't mention what we'd seen or heard. We didn't talk about it at all. Actually, not for months. But about 6 months later, my brother called me late at night. He said he'd been doing research, reading about skinwalkers and other stories from the area. He'd found reports from other campers who'd had similar experiences. People hearing voices, finding strange tracks, being circled by something they couldn't see. He said most of the reports came from that same area where we'd been camping. And he said there was a pattern. The encounters always happened in October, always around the same time we'd been there. He also told me he'd been having nightmares, dreams where he was back in his tent, listening to the zipper being pulled down. But this time, the thing came inside. He'd wake up in a cold sweat, checking to make sure his bedroom door was locked. I admitted I'd been having similar dreams. In mine, I'd hear my wife's voice calling from outside, and I'd go to the window and see something standing in my backyard, something that looked almost human but wasn't quite right. He asked if I thought we should go back, maybe try to document what was happening. I told him absolutely not. Whatever was out there, it knew us now. It had our voices. And I didn't want to give it another chance. We haven't been back since. We talk about finding a new camping spot, maybe somewhere in Colorado or Utah, but we haven't done it. I think we're both still too spooked, and I think we both know, on some level, that it wouldn't matter where we went, because the thing that found us wasn't tied to that place. It was tied to us. Sometimes, late at night, I still hear it. Not outside my house, nothing like that, but in my memory, clear as day. That flat, emotionless version of my brother's voice, asking if I'm awake, and I wonder if it's still out there, in those mountains, waiting for us to come back. My wife asked me once why I don't go camping with my brother anymore. I told her we'd just gotten too busy, that life had gotten in the way. She accepted that answer, but I could tell she didn't quite believe it. She knows me too well. She knows when I'm hiding something. I want to tell her the truth. I want to explain why I check the locks twice every night, why I won't let our kids camp in the backyard, why I insist on leaving lights on around the house after dark. But I can't. Because telling her would mean admitting that there are things out there we don't understand, things that can hurt us, and I don't want her to live with that fear. So, I keep it to myself. Me and my brother, we carry it together, and we wait, hoping that whatever found us in those mountains has moved on, has forgotten about us, has found someone else to torment. But deep down, I don't think it has. I think it's still up there, waiting in that clearing by the stream, practicing our voices, getting them perfect, waiting for the day we're foolish enough to come back,